All right, so cybersecurity.
Indeed.
Yeah, why don't you, Christine, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, just to give context basically to the audience.
Correct. So I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at WithSecure. I've been working in cybersecurity for the past 21 years. And WithSecure is also a provider of cybersecurity products and services with headquarters in Helsinki, Finland.
So why don't we just jump into it? So I'm Luc Chénier, the CEO of Kyiv Post, and excuse me, in Kyiv, Ukraine. Knowing a lot about the war and cyber threats and all that,
Yeah.
can you tell me about Finland, what it was like before the war, while Ukraine still, when the war was started,
Yeah.
with Ukraine, and how it was building up with the rumors that you guys were going to join NATO and all that, and the ascension to NATO. What has been the steps on cybersecurity and hacks and all that?
Absolutely. So before the invasion of Ukraine, I mean, Finland and Russia have had sort of like a relationship that worked well enough for them. I mean, of course, given the Finnish history, it's never been complete trust, but there was cooperation that worked well for the two countries. Now, the moment Russia invaded Ukraine, Finland condemned Russia's actions immediately on the day itself. And then the thinking has shifted when it comes to joining NATO. Now, converting that to cybersecurity, before Finland decided to join NATO, we had denial of service attacks still obviously in the past. But that year, in 2022, there has been a massive rise of different types of cyber threats. One of the biggest things that we have really seen was the GPS jamming attacks. Now, if you think about it, between 2018 to 2021, there were a few GPS jamming attacks, and sometimes they were just really commercial things that didn't work very well. But by 2022, everything that we have seen from 2021 and earlier, it has more than doubled in 2022. And then it more than doubled again in 2023. And now it more than doubled again in 2024. So there has been an exponential rise of these GPS jamming attacks. Now the interesting thing is that, of course, we don't want to jump into conclusions, so there's two schools of thought. And one of them say that, I mean, this is the way that Russia deters drone attacks, because they are GPS based. But then it's interesting that if you see where are these jams happening, they're not exactly on the areas where there would have been drone attacks, because they are happening some areas of the Finnish border, a little bit further to the north. There are no drones in there, and it's just disrupting the airports that we have had. For instance, there are smaller airports that are remotely controlled by bigger airports. We can't do that anymore. They have to be locally controlled, and thus it becomes just a little bit pricier to use the backup things. And of course, the denial of service attacks. I mean, you probably have seen this during the beginning of the attacks as well in Kyiv. So they have also grown massively. They are fueled by hacktivists, and initially it was interesting that quite a bit of them claimed to be hacktivists, but then we couldn't really get to what's behind them because they have been gamified a little bit. So if you were doing denial of service attacks and you had more impact versus the others, you can actually earn for that in cryptocurrency equivalent in ruble, like Russian ruble value. So there is funding behind the scenes happening. And it's interesting because like through time, we have also evolved our defense capabilities now in Finland because of these denial of service attacks. And sort of like you get used to it, you get desensitized a little bit because it becomes the new normal. And then last October, our biggest banks, one of our biggest banks, Noria, suffered a denial of service attack. And the one who claimed that this denial of service attack is like it's their doing is actually a hacktivist that is Arabic speaking. But then we don't really know behind the scenes who are really the true operators of this one. And the interesting thing about this bank is that the authentication system that we use for this bank is the same authentication that we use for our taxes, same authentication that we use for our healthcare. So you don't actually just deny service to the financial institution, you could deny service across the different services as well that the person has with society. But I have talked too much about it already.
No, it's okay. We just went through 3 questions in one, so I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to be repeating the same question. Well, look, in case, I'm sorry if you already answered, but, are we, seeing how the evolution, how quickly from before the war to where we are today in terms of cyber attacks, it used to be mainly about ransom, but now it's about more like seeding chaos. Where do you see that that's happening? Do you find that the ransom part is now taking a second stage and it's now becoming more about seeding chaos? Like in Ukraine, we had a major telecom operator, Kyiv Post, which was knocked out for a week. That's about 60% of the 30 million population was without a mobile. They couldn't do banking, they couldn't connect with each other. It was pure chaos for a week, and it really showed us how much we depend on our mobiles.
Absolutely.
So much, and what they can do to disrupt and to cause complete, not just dropping bombs, but by disrupting us in a big way. How do you see that? Is it more about chaos rather than ransom?
It is a little bit of both still. So I say this because a lot of the ransomware threat actors that we have seen, and actually the biggest ransom that we have seen ever, $75 million even happened this year. So it keeps getting bigger. So they are still there, the ones who are trying to make money off it, the cyber criminal gangs. And of course, the hacktivists who are supporting nation states are also there. So they add up to the pile. And then there is also nation state threat actors that are really driven by government agencies are also there. Now, the thing with this is interesting because before the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February, there was actually one cyber criminal threat actor. It was called R-Evil then, and they were based in Russia. And the interesting thing about Russia is that if you're a cyber criminal, you're operating there, but you're not attacking the local citizens within Russian soil, you're essentially not really a criminal. So you can operate freely, and this is why we see in the malware that they write that they're clearly looking at, do you have Russian-speaking keyboard? Is this potentially a Russian device? Just to make sure that they don't infect you, because then they could end up in jail as well. So before the invasion, in January, the FBI actually had a cooperation with the Russian police. And these are evil. There were arrests that happening. So this is the thing that happens to cyber criminals when Russia cooperates. But then after the invasion, there is no more cooperation, no police cooperation, so these criminals now can operate with impunity behind Russian soil. So much so that the threat actor for Lockbit, one of the biggest ransomware criminal gangs, when he was listed as one of the most wanted, he printed that on a t-shirt and posted that on social media that he was most wanted. Because he's behind borders that he can't be arrested for.
Yeah.
So it became kind of like double issue. It's not just the nation states now that are attacking, but the cyber criminals sort of like are protected, unfortunately, behind their soul.
So do you, I'm just going to jump around a little bit, but I think you talked about, are we becoming desensitized to cyber attacks? And it's just, if we push a little bit, we all think of, we hear about somebody's bank was taken over, a cyber attack has happened. It's always somebody else's problems until it becomes our problem. Such like Kyiv Post. Originally, when the war first started, we were bombarded with our site over and over and over again. I had teams working night long to bring it back on, bring DDoS attacks and some more advanced. Thank God I had an amazing team. And that forced me as a CEO to say, after we kind of got it under control, I said, this is going to continue on. So we need to rebuild the entire infrastructure of our digital. We need to rebuild our site. We had to do everything from zero as we're a new organization. Yeah. Do you find that it's becoming all too common? And what's the solution to being preventative?
Yeah, I think we need to understand that whenever we build technology, whenever we have organizations, the world has a lot of good people, but not everyone is good. So some people are going to misuse that against you or use your organization as a conduit to attack others. And this is what's happening all the time. And we need to be aware whenever we're designing the technologies, whenever we're designing infrastructure, that this is gonna happen. And this is continuously happening anyway. all of these attacks, like this probing in our different environments, are happening automatically. So I'll give you an example. I created a website a few years ago myself, and less than an hour I already had visitors. And these are not the visitors I like. These are the visitors who are trying to hammer my website to see, are there vulnerabilities? Can they get in? Can they misuse my website so that they can serve malicious content to the visitors of my website? So it may not impact me, but it impacts my visitors. So we need to be mindful that whatever we build, whether it's network infrastructure, whether it's AI models, that somebody would be bound to misuse them. And how do we prevent that misuse?
So see, we have about 7 minutes, and I think that this is a longer kind of question. And it's one for all of you.
Talk about it all day.
Yeah, but for all of you to think about after in a big way. I just want to set it up a bit. 30 years ago, when I was in advertising, it's already been this long, we were getting paid as an ad agency up to $100,000 to do a website that you can now build for $10 on Wix. These days, or an example such as that. 4 years ago, I was looking at articles to be written, which was absolute garbage, and ChatGPT wasn't around. And this is the speed, and now we see how great the articles and what they can do in ChatGPT and AI, which is everyone is talking about. Knowing that and seeing now that there's a lot of app builders that you can do no code and you don't need specialists like in hackers and a specialist, do we see what's the future of hacking? And if there's going to be no code in AI, can any organizations break through the AI algorithm and all that to actually to deploy and to cause absolute chaos in this world? Can AI be used for all the wrong reasons and not all the positives as we're thinking about when it comes to cyber attacks?
Well, I have been working in this industry for 2 decades. And what I have seen with technologies is that threats always follow the trends of technologies. So you have the internet, the moment banking went online, phishing came in. The moment we had Internet of Things, IoT devices, the size of the DDoS attacks that we have seen before and after have grown massively. Whenever we create new technologies, it also opens up an opportunity for misuse. And the barrier of knowledge, the barrier of learning and entry into these new technologies have always gotten lower and lower through time. And if you say about no code, Luc, I mean the barrier of entry of creating, for example, malicious code just becomes lower once again. Now, these are the things that we continuously grapple with, because whenever we build new technologies, we usually think about how they can be used. We think about use cases, the features that we design, and how this could improve lives of people. But it's very rare that we threat model it, and we think about how could this be misused against my organization, against my users, or against their users, for instance. And it's only when thinking about this misuse do we integrate all of these defensive capabilities into these technologies. And this is why we had regulations like the Cyber Resilience Act, for example, when it comes to IoT devices, so that once it's out there, it doesn't get misused against society. And when it comes to no code, I mean, think about it, it's not just no code, but quite a bit of these AI models as well nowadays are becoming open source. And I would have to say as well, I'm a big fan of open source, and during the past 20 years, the technological growth that we have seen could be attributed actually in big part to open source, because a lot of our organizations no longer need to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to build your own encryption algorithm, you can just get it from open source, and it's well reviewed by people out there. But then you change that to AI models, you open source it, all of the filters are also there. All of the filters that disallow you to create weapons, or all of the filters that disallow you to create malicious content, or adult content, unwanted content. And if you give that to someone's hands, they don't need to code it, they can remove the filters. You can imagine how somebody with malicious intent could misuse them, because that has been the same thing that they have been doing anyway for the past 2 decades. So it will just transfer into these new technologies that we're now having. So these are also the things that we need to be mindful about, that a lot of these technologies can be dual use.
But can we learn from the past, as you said, that's just transferring from one set to another? I was on the bus on the shuttle today. I was listening to a lot of AI people all talking about how the government can control it and how we can put certain filters and all that. And I asked them the same question.
Yeah.
And a lot of them went, whoa, it's true. So is there something we can learn from our past that we can somehow control this or limit it as much? Or will criminals always find a way through?
Typically criminals find a way, but I think we need to not just think about the governments and the regulations, because they are the ones that can be held accountable. The cyber criminals, you can't hold them accountable. They don't pay taxes, their names are not listed anywhere, and they are more agile than the rest of us. I mean, typically, if they are small, agile cyber criminal groups, they are very quick to ride on top of new technologies. And if you think about these groups, during the past decade, that the ransomware cyber criminal groups have been growing. They have been getting ransoms in millions, like tens of millions of dollars in ransom. They have money. They can run these models. If they really want to misuse this, they can. I mean, they are probably billionaires already in their own right, but nobody monitors this money. And if they have the same financial capacity, and these models that are open source that they don't even need to build on top of, we need to be mindful of then what will happen if they have this on their hands. How will we defend our organizations against such type of attacks? How do we defend our society? Because they are not the ones who are going to respect regulations.
I think we only got a minute left, so I'm going to give you the one that we agreed if we didn't have time we'd scrap, but let's put it in anyway.
Yes.
Do you feel, and maybe you talked about this earlier, but do you feel that the old ways of invading a country was physically send in people, attack, bomb? Next came in Ukraine and showed the whole drone issue that ran a lot of these tech things obsolete. Do you feel that in the future, cyber attacks, they won't even be needing anybody to invade a country, but they will actually cripple a country, as we said, simply by online? The new war front will be online. It's
already happening anyway today. So from our water systems to our electricity to the internet like that we have, everything is interconnected and can be controlled online. And that's like one of the easiest way to cripple a country. So that's why it needs to be defended. So it just adds a new dimension to the warfare that we are already seeing, and the damage is just actually wider.
And on that, we got 10 seconds left. Any questions? So anyways, thank you very much, everybody. And
thank you.
Christine, thank you very much.
Thank you, Luc.